Moin moin, you at the other end of the tube. So today's episode is going to be dedicated to a very salty looking little gem. A boat that I've been fond of for a relatively long time, and I came across it twice. It led to the purchase of other boats that we have owned, but I never really owned it myself, but I've been on it once. So today we are going to have a closer look at the famous Hurley 22, the Hurley 22R and the Hurley 700. Enjoy. Yeah, so why the Hurley 22? As I have mentioned briefly here in the intro, I never, or we never owns a boat, but I came across it twice, like I said, and it always led up to another purchase decision of another boat. Way back then, when we were first looking at a small compact trailer sailor, we kind of stumbled across it, and I know it's by all means not a trailer sailor. The boat is way too heavy for that, and the keel is deep and massive and everything. So she is okay to be trailered around size-wise, so you don't need any special permissions or such. But it is a relatively heavy boat and somewhat cumbersome to, set up, and that is not really what you want to drive around every day behind your car or pickup truck or whatever you use to tow your boat with. We ended up back then eventually with a Varianta 65, which is a 21.5 footer made by dealer Varianta. And before we purchased that boat, we looked actually at a Hurley 22. That happened to be relatively close to our area back then, and she was in pieces. So the owner basically brought her to his place of work, place of business. It was like a big machine shop, and there he kept the boat, and the whole rigging was stored somewhere else, and she was sitting there, not even on a trailer, she was sitting on a cradle essentially. So back then the logistics would have been a nightmare to get her out of there. And on top of that, we weren't quite confident that everything that belonged to the boat was actually there. So that was a reason why we turned away from the purchase. However, I had back then the opportunity to look really close at the boat, and we actually climbed inside and looked around the cabin. And I must say, I've been completely surprised how roomy she was for a 22-footer. So it was quite generous for such a small and compact boat. So I was impressed. It really kind of felt good. It felt solid. It had an outboard well. It wasn't the one with the diesel inboard. These are relatively rare. And it was very appealing. And it looked good. It had kind of this solid feel to it that was talking to me like, hey, take me across an ocean, I can do it. That kind of boat. So let's look a little bit into the history. The Hurley 22 is a long-established family cruiser and club racer. And that is way back then, when she was designed. I mean, the idea came up in 1963 when George Hurley provided the designer Ian Anderson with the, let's say, brief to meet demands for this boat that he wanted to build. So Ian Anderson went on and took what George Hurley gave him and tried to kind of pin it down. And it had to be a boat that could be sailed as a small family cruising yacht, but also as a club racer. So she had to be relatively nimble and such. And it had to be designed in two major configurations, and there would be one as a deep deep keel yacht, like a long keel, basically. And the other version would be a bilge keel, so that she could fall dry in tidal areas. As most of you will probably know, the waters around the North Sea in general have strong tidal currents, and in some areas boats would fall dry entirely because the tidal difference is enormous. So after George Hurley approached Mr. Anderson with his idea of what he wanted him to design in 1963, they basically started developing in 1964, and the first hull was sold in 1966. A few of them, about 5 to 8% of all boats made, came with the option of an inboard diesel. That would make it a really salty little pocket cruiser that can take you anywhere, in my opinion anyways. And there is a record of Hurleys have crossed the Atlantic Ocean, and even one I think has circumnavigated in the Pacific. So these boats have been all around and about and really went into deep blue water. If we look here at the specs, she is designed in a way that we have a beam to length ratio of 1:3. Alright you guys, but before we get into the nitty gritty and talk about boat specifications, I gotta have a coffee. Schatzi, you want a coffee?
Yes, please. I think I need that.
Run as fast as you can. He's gonna talk about boat numbers in great detail.
Okay, let's have a quick look at the Hurley 22R/700 and her specifications. As mentioned earlier, the boat was offered in two major different versions. You could either have the fin keel with a spade rudder or the bilge keels with a skekang rudder. Whereas the fin keel is actually, in my opinion, more like a full keel with a cutaway forefoot and encapsulated ballast. That, granted, does not go all the way back to the actual rudder. That's why you could argue it's a fin. Well, it's something within between, I guess. But anyhow, important to note here is that the ballast in the beginning, made from cast iron, is actually encapsulated into the hull and not bolted underneath the boat. So there's no concerns about foul keelboards at all, which is nice, I think. Rigging of the boat, she was rigged as a masthead sloop. So the mast would have one mainsail, one foresail, and the foresail would go all the way to the top of the mast. Construction, hand-laid fiberglass in polyester resin with a generous amount of gel coat, and carried out to very high production standard. They used iron, or later on lead, especially in the 700s, and the boat was built first in 1966 and then remained in production at Hurley Marine Limited in Plymouth, United Kingdom until 1975, 74-ish. There's a little bit of controversy there. So she is a British girl, and there were 1,200 made of them. That is, however, throughout the entire production run from different manufacturers. Because when Hurley Marine Limited ceased production in 1975-ish in favor of their other models like the 18, the 20, 24, 27, I believe there was a 28 and a 30, they sold licensed tooling and name to South Coast Marine, which later on renamed themselves into Ravensail. And they produced then the boat as a Hurley 22R. The R stands for Ravensail. In the later 80s then, tooling license and name went to the Netherlands, to a Dutch boat building company called Yachtbouw Twente, and they produced the Hurley 700. I believe it remained in production there until 1990, if I'm not mistaken. Length overall of the boat is 22 feet, and the length of the waterline is only 17 feet. So she has these overhangs and very beautiful classic lines. I think it's a very aesthetically pleasing design. It looks very good. And it's also very seaworthy because Ian Anderson was aiming for that formula of beam to length of the boat ratio 1:3 roughly, which is achieved, as you can see here, length overall 22 and then the beam of the boat 7.42 feet. Again, to the right hand side you find here metric measures, and to the left imperial. Sail area, a total of 240 square foot. That is a decent amount of canvas to get her going, and her draft was 3.75 feet max for the fin keel version, and the bilge keel version would draw 2.5 feet only. So the displacement and ballast is something that I found is all over the place. Throughout the production run of the boat there are very different numbers. In the beginning she was sitting at 4,000 pound total, and ballast component here, or ballast, of 2,300 pounds, and that brings her ballast to displacement to 57.5, so almost 60, which is very high. It makes for an insanely stiff boat. I have also found data that said the boat was also produced with a ballast to displacement ratio of 40%, which I could not really find any further information on, and I wouldn't know what changed here. Was it maybe total displacement being higher, ballast stays the same, or ballast less, or both numbers kind of went away from one another? I cannot really tell you much more about this, so if any of you guys know more here, please leave a comment. Will be very much appreciated. Again, her sail area to displacement comes out really good with 15.28. That is not too much, not too little here. I think she's right on the money for a boat that wants to sail in a blow and take heavy weather. And she gets really going around 50 knots sustained or so. It seems to be ideal, and she wants to be sailed at a heel of about 15 degrees is what I found in a test sail report of the boat, where a test sail crew achieved the best hull speed of about 5.8 knots, either downwind or on a beam reach roughly, and they said about 50 knots sustained is good. And then don't let her heel more than 15 degrees, and the boat has her has her best efficiency there. Sail area to displacement there is with 15.28 apparently ideal. They however mentioned it would be beneficial if the mast would be moved back by a foot roughly in favor of a shortened mainsail and a bigger foresail to balance the boat a little better. But they also had the spade rudder on a 1966 model that again had the tendency to be exposed to the eddies coming off the keel, and therefore being less efficient, not having a laminar hydro flow over the profile, and the tendency to stall. That later on had been corrected by putting a skeg to the rudder, which apparently improves that significantly. The displacement to length is relatively high with 363.47, which comes out of short waterline, narrow beam, boat sits deep in the water, and is relatively heavy build. So that makes for a really high comfort ratio of 23.14, which is really hard to find in a 22-footer. So this is very impressive in my opinion. Also, the capsize screening formula comes out nicely at a 1.87, which makes for a really, really safe boat. So if the worst case scenario would come live and a broadside hit by a rogue wave makes the boat roll, you could take comfort in this number that she will righten herself and come back up. Let's have a quick look at the layout of the boat. So starting here from stern, moving to bow. As mentioned earlier, in the aft compartment here is actually a well for the outboard engine, and also enough space for 2 gasoline tanks if you wanted to put it in there. And if you would be one of the very few happy owners that had one equipped with an inboard diesel, that's about 5 to 8% of all boats made, this aft compartment would be just a storage compartment, an extra locker. Moving forward, you have to port and starboard decent size lockers that are deep, not very long but deep, and they're not very long, as you can see, in favor of the quarter berths to starboard and port side. That would allow enough space down below deck for 4 sailors to sleep in relative comfort in the boat. Also worth mentioning is one feature that makes her really salty and capable, in my opinion, is a decent sized bridge deck and high companionway entrance, which is, in my opinion, a very important feature of a blue water capable boat, in case that she would get swamped by a wave, that water wouldn't run down right away into the boat. And yeah, so that she has, definitely. You can see also that she's rigged in a way that the boom goes all the way over the cockpit, and the main sheet ends kind of behind the tiller on that traveler here between the cockpit and locker. And that allows the helmsman to have access to the main sheet as well to the tiller here, which is, in my opinion, ideal. Also, the winches for the 4 sheets, the jib sheets or general sheets, are within reach, so you can easily single-hand the boat from any position here in the cockpit. The cockpit length is also generous enough, with more than 6 feet in length, so that you can actually sleep on the cockpit benches if needed. And stepping down below into the boat, I was impressed with how much volume there was. I think it's always hard to guesstimate headroom, but I want to say around 5 feet, if not even a little bit more than 5 feet headroom. I want to see, let's call it 5 feet around that, give or take. And also a lot of room over the quarter berths, with about 2 feet, a little shy of that, so it didn't feel too claustrophobic, actually. You know, she is small and snug in there. It's a 22-footer, it is what it is, but she is definitely a deep boat that sits deep in the water and has a lot of upper headroom volume, so to speak. Then moving forward, you have the galley midship, and there's also a lot of variation here. Some owners moved the galley more into the companionway entrance, and then on some models, owners apparently removed the galley midship in favor of a wider saloon area down below. And then forward we have a V-berth with a sea toilet ahead, right in the V-berth. And then forward of the V-berth is the anchor locker, and then in the later 700s the anchor locker would be molded into the deck molding. And anyhow, most 22s would have the typical chain anchor locker in front of the V-berth. There's ample of storage throughout the entire boat, underneath all the berths and behind the side of the boat. The furniture there is ample of storage opportunities. I read on one account that the boat had 22 storage compartments, I believe. I don't know if that's true, and especially not true for all of the models, but I would imagine it's close to something like that. So there is definitely everything from pots to pans that you can take with you in the boat. And also she was equipped standard-wise on port side with a pull-out navigation table, which is a nice feature if you step down below and you stand in the companionway with an open hatch, where you have then standing headroom under a dodger or something. That would be ideal to have your charts there and your navigation station right there. All overall, a very well carried out design. Also, I liked how bright the cabin was. The 22s have those two port lights on the coach roof on either side, whereas the 700s have one longer, narrow kind of window here. But either way, all of them have a relatively bright salon area due to the port lights. And if you have the front hatch open and your main companionway hatch, you have good ventilation throughout the boat. And also another feature that came to my attention is that forward port light here that I did not really see on any of the 22s or 700s that are out there really. I don't know if that was only a planned feature and never materialized, but I did not find a single boat that would actually have a forward port light, which I like. I have that right now on the Bianca 27, and I think is a great feature to have if you step down below for a moment and have the boat self-steer, however you achieve that, that you can actually see where you're going forward. So I did not see that on any of the boats in Flash. Also, for all of you out there, please leave comments down below if you have anything to add to this. Especially the Hurley 22 R700 is such a complex topic because the boat had such a long production run under license from different manufacturers. There's so much variation in this that it is really difficult to cover all of it. So best would be if you guys know something about it or would like to add or leave a comment, please do that. Go into the description box, leave a comment, and it's actually not in the description box, I think. Just leave a comment down below, it's always appreciated. Also, if you really liked the content here today, if you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, that thumb up, and if you want to help us out, subscribe to the channel. And that helps us out big times, really it does. Also, if you hit the little bell icon, you will always be notified when we release new footage. The ones of you that really want to knock it out of the park, you can find our link to our Patreon page down below. That's also in the description box. You know, there's also a direct PayPal link if you want to buy us a beer or something. What else? Yeah, spoiler alert. So this year will be now at the trailing edge of season 1, which I called The Boats That Get Us Here. And from now on we'll work more on the boats that we have right now. Bianca 27, and season 2 then will be more concerned with the Bianca 27 and the total refit and getting her back into the water. How far we can push it this year is hard to tell. I mean, we are in the midst of a pandemic, so I don't know what will be possible realistically, if we can actually leave the German coastline and sail somewhere else up to Sweden or Denmark or whatever I have here. That is all still not quite clear, but we hope that, you know, in about 6 or 8 weeks from now we'll approach Splash Day and actually get her back afloat. That would be phenomenal. So bear with us. Season 2, again, spoiler alert, season 2 will be all about the Bianca 27. Thanks for tuning in today, and well, you know, we'll hope to see you next time on Sailing Good Old Boats.